Welcome to On Tour with Sport 24. I'm Emma Saunders and this is your guide to the world's most iconic sporting cities. Each episode will be heading to a different part of the world to give you an inside view into what makes it a sporting city. We're going to find out what the locals recommend to get a real flavour of its sports and culture, and what you should experience when you come to visit. It's what Sport 24 is all about, a sports channel that connects onboard passengers to those unmissable live sporting moments. So, whether you're flying at 35,000 feet or relaxing on your ocean cruise, you can be watching the game live. Sounds like the only way to travel. So buckle up and sit back. You're listening to On Tour with Sport 24.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Sport 24, we'd like to welcome you to Melbourne.
Yes, we're starting our journey in Melbourne, Australia, arguably the sporting capital of the world, so dedicated to sport, in fact, that it even has its own sports and entertainment precinct. And joining me for this journey is TikToker extraordinaire and intrepid traveller Rob Adcock. Hi Rob, welcome along. Now, before we meander through Melbourne, just tell us a little bit about you and what you do, because creating your content, it must take you far and wide. But what about Melbourne? Is it a city that you're familiar with?
It is. I visited many, many years ago, and my kind of brief experience with Melbourne was a lot of St Kilda around that area. So you can imagine the kind of trip that it was, and spending time getting sunburnt mainly. But Melbourne, what a place for many, many different things. How long into the episode are we going to mention neighbours? Because that is up there with one of my favourite things about the place.
Yeah, I've got an early confession as well, actually. I visited Melbourne myself a few years ago, and of course the tennis, the cricket, they were two of the main attractions, but I didn't sign on the dotted line and book that flight until I knew we were going to Ramsay Street as well. You can't go to the other side of the world and not visit, the setting of the world-famous neighbours.
It's all about that. If you're not going to see toadfish, what is the point? That is always going to be the first case.
Exactly. So outside of neighbours and St Kilda, as you mentioned there, what else do you know about the city? What do you feel really puts it on the map?
Yeah, as you say, it's all about the sport, isn't it? You look around the cities in the world and it's one of those that jumps out straight away. The F1, we'll talk about the Australian Open tennis, the cricket, Aussie rules football, which I know we're going to talk about a little bit later on, and the Melbourne Cup. There's just so much going on in this place. It's one of those things that if you're making a bucket list of places to watch sport, it's right up there. I've put together a little bit of a list later on for you, Emma, as well. Just a few tips for you, which I think you'll like.
Excellent. Well, we look forward to that. And we couldn't do this without a local to guide us through the city. And we've got just the man for that.
The shorter ball from Sintermath. Djokovic coming in cross court. Now he's going to play the low backhand volley, but he puts it into the net. Well done again. He's hanging on by his fingernails.
Sports journalist, commentator, and local Melbourneite, I think you might say, Peter Marcato. Hello, Peter. How are you doing?
Hello, Emma. Hello, Rob. It's great to be here. And it's great that you've decided to go straight to the top and pick the ultimate sporting city to have first on in Melbourne, because you don't need to worry about the rest. You've got everything you need right here.
It certainly sounds like it, doesn't it? Can you just clear something up for me? Have I got that right? Are you a Melbourneite if you're from Melbourne? A Melbourneian?
No, I'm a Melburnian. We are Melburnians here rather than Melbourneites.
Okay, well, I'm glad we've cleared that up. Let's get back to what you were just saying there. It's great to hear your Aussie tones, by the way. We're recording this in England right now, and it does suddenly feel about 10, 15 degrees warmer. So just tell us about yourself, what you get up to in Melbourne, and then, what this city has to offer.
So I'm a sports broadcaster and commentator, mainly in tennis. So the Australian Open and the Australian Summer of Tennis is my big 4 weeks here locally for the year, but also spend time travelling, hanging out in your part of the world as well for Wimbledon and travelling to a couple of the other international tournaments, and then do some of the local footy or Aussie rules to get the terminology right, and a host of other sports, because there's so many options here in Melbourne. But in terms of what sport, well, you name it, we've got it. Obviously Aussie rules is the big sport, but we've got rugby league, we've got rugby union teams, we've got netball teams, basketball, absolutely everything from the international events right through to the grassroots. So it's not just obviously watching sport, but a lot of Australians love to play sport as well. And there's a lot of different competitions in all sorts of different codes. So that's also what makes it such a great sporting city. Not only do people come to watch sport, the best of the best playing, but also they participate in sport too.
Mm. Oh, so beautifully described. I feel like I'm right in amongst it. My senses are going wild here. You mentioned there the Australian Open, Peter, which is probably the first thing that springs to mind when you think of major sporting events in Melbourne. It's hosted every year in January, and the Australian Open is one of tennis's 4 Grand Slams, so they're the biggest events on the tennis calendar. Now, Peter, you've been fortunate enough to work at the Aussie Open for the last few years, so we thought who better to give us a guided tour of Melbourne Park, just a stone's throw from the world-famous Melbourne Cricket Ground, otherwise known as the MCG, and the city's central business district, the CBD.
Oh, what a way to finish. It was 4 that was required. Stoinis says, no, I'll have 6 of them. The Melbourne Stars.
Well, I'm starting my journey outside the mighty MCG, and it is looking absolutely magnificent. And well, I'm on my way to Melbourne Park, and one of the great things about the Melbourne sporting precinct, if you like, is that it's very close to the CBD in Melbourne, and that everything is connected together. I've got the road just alongside me as I'm walking along, but from the MCG to Melbourne Park, it's a less than 5-minute journey, and then from there, it's about a 10-minute walk into the CBD of Melbourne. So everything is very close, and that's what makes Melbourne such a unique city for major events. You can have a 100,000-seat stadium packed to the rafters. There could be a concert going on at Rod Laver Arena, or of course the Australian Open, which regularly attracts crowds of up to 80,000 during the day. And then a stone's throw away, I'm actually running into football fans at the moment, because one of the local teams is in action at the rectangular stadium, is known as Amy Park, and there's a match going on there this afternoon. So one of the great things is the sporting precinct is so close to the CBD of Melbourne, so accessible, and it's not uncommon to have major sporting events going on at each of the different venues. So I've made my way inside Melbourne Park, and the first stop is Garden Square, which is sort of in the centre of the precinct. And when the plans for Melbourne Park were drawn up, this was one of the original meeting places here on the grounds, and certainly it's kept that reputation up, and people who come in on a grounds pass, so don't have direct access to the main stadiums, often spend a bit of time here. There's a big screen where they can watch all the action, catch up with friends, there's often live music, there's plenty of food, there's plenty of drinks, and it's just a great relaxed sort of feel in amongst all the tennis and everything else going on. Well, if you can hear me over the noise, I've arrived at Grand Slam Oval here at Melbourne Park, and Grand Slam Oval is right near the Yarra River as you walk into the site from that direction, and this is the party zone. They don't call it the Happy Slam for nothing. There's a concert going on at the nearby Kia Arena. There's all sorts of things and activities and activations going on Grand Slam Oval. In fact, some of the people who come to the Australian Open each year don't even see a ball being struck on a tennis court because they're having too much fun eating and drinking and having fun with their friends out here. This is more than a tennis tournament. It's an event that takes over Melbourne for 2 weeks out of the year, and so many people come to experience the great atmosphere, the great weather usually, and maybe even see some of the tennis as well. But as I'm standing here, I'm looking at Grand Slam Oval, I'm looking at Kia Arena, and there's just a hive of activity, people coming in their thousands to sample and soak up the great atmosphere of not only the tennis, which is coming up, but also the party that overtakes Melbourne for 2 weeks.
Hi, I'm former professional tennis player Jill Krabis. The atmosphere is always great because I think everyone's just excited after the new year. The crowds are always fantastic. They're very fair as far as, rooting for some great tennis and getting behind a lot of the players, especially some of the underdogs if you're playing a top seed, so that's always exciting. But what's super special for me is I've stayed with the same family for many, many years, and this year when I went, we figured out it was my 24th year, so they're a second mom and dad to me. I've watched all their kids grow up. They now have a bunch of grandkids, so it's been really nice to be a part of that family.
Hi there, I'm Mark Woodford, former Australian Open champion. How special is it to play the Australian Open in Melbourne? Well, there's so much emotion that is surrounding the Australians playing at home.
Ash Barty is the Australian Open champion. Amazing scenes. Casey Dankwa, her great friend, her doubles partner, first to congratulate Ash.
The Australian Open is the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. So the beginning of January, we have other events in the build-up to arriving in Melbourne and competing for the year's first Grand Slam title.
And now Djokovic all willing to one up the line. He's just made it. Block back from centre backs. It goes long! And it is 10 of the absolute best for Novak Djokovic.
So the final stop on the tour here of Melbourne Park is actually the centrepiece of everything, which is Rod Laver Arena. And in a couple of hours' time, it will be the men's singles final of the Australian Open for 2023. And at the moment, it's Novak Djokovic who's actually warming up on court, getting ready. In a couple of hours' time, this stadium will be filled. 15,000 people will be inside Rod Laver Arena, and there'll be a huge atmosphere. Then after the tournament's finished, they pack up very quickly, because in a couple of days' time, this stadium gets transformed back into a concert venue, which is used for a lot of the year. There's all sorts of different events that have been held here over the years. They've even had a swimming pool in the middle of Rod Laver Arena. So if you do come down to Melbourne Park, one of the things about coming down here is obviously the concerts and everything like that, but then also the opportunity to actually hit on some of the match courts. Now, not Rod Laver Arena or the ones under the roof, but a lot of the outside courts are available for court hire. So if you're a tennis player and you want to come to Melbourne and hit where the pros hit, you've got the opportunity down here. But it's a magnificent precinct. It's so close to the city. There's so much going on, not just sport, but culture and music and all sorts of different things here. It's a wonderful place to come and visit here, the Rod Laver Arena in the Melbourne Park precinct, right in the centre of Melbourne.
Well, Peter there, I think clocking up some serious steps. I have to say though, Peter, just quickly before we move on, what struck me most, a swimming pool on Rod Laver? How?
Yeah, it happened. I think it was back in 2007. There was the World Championships, and they actually had to build a pool from nothing. They had the blank space right in the middle where they host the tennis event, the Australian Open, of course, and they actually had to build it from the ground up. It did take a long time, but you really got to be hopeful that nothing leaks, but they did a fantastic job, and it was quite unique actually because it was under the roof. They needed a bigger stadium. We do have one at the Sports and Aquatic Centre, which is kind of where the F1 is and the Commonwealth Games was and everything like that. But it was just a huge atmosphere and a huge event. Very much a one-off. It's not something that we do all the time, but it was quite unique. And Rod Laver Arena hadn't been used like that before or since.
I wanted to ask you about the swimming, if that's all right, Peter, because I worked at the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham last year at the Aquatic Centre. Is everyone in Australia born in a pair of trunks? Because they look like the best swimmers in every event.
Well, you were at the Commonwealth Games, so we do win everything there anyway, so it probably gives you a distorted view of things. But in a general sense, I mean, yes, we grew up near the water, all the big centres around the country, and Melbourne, we mentioned it right off the top, hanging around at St Kilda Beach. We love getting by the pool. A lot of people have pools around Melbourne, but getting down to the beach and learning one at the Sports and